Record on this computer. Let's recording in progress. It sounds like crime in progress or something. Okay. So what I want to do, we've talked a little bit about the polis and therefore and political community. And so this is Plato's Republic, right? I want to talk just briefly a little bit about Plato and the dialogue form. So something that's really interesting and odd is that Plato, we all know he's like one of the great philosophers. Alfred North Whitehead, um, famous British 20th century philosopher, he said, the history of philosophy is the footnotes of Plato. And I think what he meant by that is like Plato addressed all the big questions. He didn't provide all the answers, obviously, because if he had provided all the answers like philosophy, philosophers wouldn't have had anything to do with themselves for the next 2,500 years. But he asked all kind of the big fundamental questions that then the history of philosophy kind of filled in the blanks, or at least that's Whitehead's kind of attitude about it all. So he is like a monumental and very interesting thinker. And what's really intriguing for us in this class, apart from the specific theme of these characters vying for a definition of justice and their disagreement that is a result of their human diversity, right? People have different opinions about what justice is, and that's part of the problem in the polis or in the political community. Because if you're going to have a society function, as we saw in Hobbes, not only do we need law, but we need the rule of law, which is like the constant, even application, the uniform application of law to everybody in the same way, because justice has something to do with being fair. And it's not just implementing a set of rules, it's applying them in a uniform way to everybody. So everybody's equal under law, right? So apart from that specific theme that is part of what we're getting at in this course, um, what's interesting is Plato does as a philosopher, right? He doesn't write these tiresome. Uh, Hold on, I've got people in the waiting room here, and I'm really befuddled about how. Oh, the little thing that normally shows up is not showing up for me. Oh, I don't know what to do other than keep going right now. Pardon me. We'll go here. Um, so the one of the big things is he doesn't write a dry logos or explanation of things. You think most philosophers, they write essays in the first person, where they just try to explain using logic and evidence, whatever the topic it is or whatever question they're trying to answer, right? Instead, Plato is an artist, or Plato is an author. He writes literature, he writes dramas, right? What we're looking at really is a play, and it's a play with characters. And so just the very form of this has some important connections with the theme of this course, in that we're dealing with characters here who have personalities and they have motivations and they're different. And sometimes with Plato, because it's just we're not familiar with this style of writing, and there's a lot of challenges to this text. We want to kind of simplify some things today. It's easy to lose sight of the degree to which these characters have real personality. Notice there's no narration for the most part. You just get thrown into the characters saying things, and in some cases doing things. And from what they say, you can start to realize a little bit about them. But some important observations to make is they all have different personalities, different characters, different motivations, different desires. And when you throw them all together in this conversation, their different personalities start to rub off of one another in interesting the way it does in real life when you throw people into a room with different dispositions and backgrounds and they start interacting, right? And of course, this is one reason why they have different definitions of justice, because they have different natures and they have different points of view. Um, so let me just say this. why does Plato write uh, philosophy in this way? Well, one thing, his central character throughout all his works, just called the Platonic Dialogues, all his body of writings, his central character is Socrates, who is who was his. You have a question?
Yes, I have. I just received a text from one of our classmates that they're trying to get in. They're in the waiting room. What should I tell them?
Well, definitely tell them I'm having I can see that they're registered. There's 3 people trying to get in, and I'm really trying to figure out how to get them in, because normally there's a little window where I just click admit, and for some reason that's not coming up right now. And I don't know why. And this I've used Zoom now a million times, and this has never happened. Let me just briefly try something. Let me click out of screen share for a
Hey,
second.
Professor, I had that issue also. I had to leave the meeting and then I came back afterward, and that was the only way for me to get in the Zoom. I tried a couple of times. I don't know if they can try that also.
Yes,
They could leave the room.
yes, that's the
Can I
way.
tell them to log out and log back on?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Right,
that's
so
how
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm at great pains here. I can see people trying to get in here, and I'm not being given like anything to click on. So normally maybe this will do it. I don't know. I'm completely mystified as to why that's happening. Um, let me just do this and see what happens. Ah, there it is. It's showing up on the side. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so normally I do screen share. Yeah, so someone said, is it the screen share? I always do screen share, but normally when that happens, like the admission window separates out from the screen share and it pops up without any problem. So today it's a mystery. All right, you're welcome, Natalie. For those of you who just got here, just touch base with me at the end of class. So why does Plato write dialogues? Why does he write dramas? Because he's concerned with human beings first and foremost. He's concerned with what they're like, and he stays close to what's important, right? Plato is a moral or a political philosopher. I'll come back to that in a second. One other reason is that and what is human life? Life's about being around other people. That's a huge part of human life. Our comradeship, our interactions, our intimacies, our hatreds, our enmities, what have you. The other thing is this: Socrates as a philosopher, we think today like an academic philosopher. They show up in a classroom and then they go home and write heavy books that nobody reads and stuff like that, right? Or only other academics read. Socrates was he was a strange guy, and when we look at the symposium, we're going to see just how unusual he is, and he's unusual in a really interesting way. And you kind of have a really funny relationship. He's very likable in certain ways, because he's a decent guy and he actually has an interesting sense of humor. But then on the other hand, he's very different from everybody. And because he's different, we have a tough time relating to him. And that makes him a little strange, even kind of like alien. But so despite Socrates being a very kind of strange bird, kind of quirky bird, he was very much a people person. And he spent his life out in the city of Athens, so it's a historical figure, talking to people and talking to people about the questions that mattered. So he wasn't home in his basement writing stuff. He was out and about with the real world, in the real world, talking with all kinds of people, and not just academics, everybody in Athens. And the interesting thing is, historically, just about everyone in Athens knew who he was, or at the very least knew something about him. So that seems to be one reason that what Plato does in his dialogues is almost somewhat historical, to try to recreate the Socrates' life and what he really did, because I had a philosophy professor have he actually said that, well, Socrates, you know, he never published anything and he never got tenure, right? And well, that's because there were no universities then, partly, but um, Plato did all the publishing for him. He wrote this monumental memoir of Socrates' life, and it's a kind of testament to the type of life he led, particularly in our moment, very important, one dedicated to the truth and one dedicated to serious questions, particularly moral philosophy. And kind of go forward here, dealing with fundamental questions. This is important. Fundamental questions about how we should live our lives, how we should live our lives. So philosophy, you could say, well, how would you describe what philosophy is? What is philosophy? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
The love of wisdom.
Okay, yeah. So here we've got the love of wisdom. And if you think about philosophy, we think normally like, I don't know, the pursuit of truth, pursuit of understanding about the big questions in life.
Good judgment,
Pardon?
good judgment also on
Yeah.
people
So
based on
eventually
experience.
we're going to get to the issue of good judgment, right? You know, Hobbes said prudence is but experience, and prudence is just a synonym for wisdom, right? And wisdom is a kind of good judgment, right? But philosophy, in the most broad sense, we think of as kind of the pursuit of truth and the unrelenting pursuit of truth. And oftentimes the pursuit of truth for its own sake, that truth itself is something to be profoundly valued, highly valued, and that it is for itself and not necessarily for anything else to be gained from it. So yes, Jim says discussions of life, ideals, and truth. So uh, in the symposium, for example, we're actually going to get a definition of what philosophy is, and it's literally the love of wisdom. So the first part, philo, it literally means love or friendship, right? When we look at Aristotle's Ethics, books 8 and 9 are going to be about friendship, and the Greek word is philia, right? And philia means love or friendship, and there's some ambiguities. Is it love? Is it friendship? It's somewhere in between, right? So love and Sophia in Greek means wisdom, right? So literally, philosophy means love of wisdom, not love of knowledge or love of facts. Like every day we get bombarded with facts from the internet and from the news and media and so on. Wisdom is something like deeper than just familiarity with facts. It has to do with good judgments about our lives, right? So back to this moral philosophy. If morality deals, we talked about this last class, with issues of right and wrong, right? Obviously, you can see how justice is in there because justice and morality are connected. They both have to do with rules connected with right or wrong and how we want to live. And so let me ask a dumb question. What do we all want from our lives? What do we all want from our lives? In the broad, most general sense.
Health and happiness.
Yeah, we want to be happy. We want to be happy. And therefore, so success is a version of happiness, right? So happiness is a generic term. And the question is, what specifically do you mean by that? And in our country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, everyone is free to pursue happiness as they understand it, so long as they're not inhibiting someone else to do the same thing, right? To pursue their happiness, right? So moral questions have everything to do with what we think is right or wrong relative to our understanding of happiness, right? You know, a lot of times students will say, well, morality is about oppressing us and keeping us in line and inhibiting our desires. And it absolutely is that, because certain desires turn out, when we discover in this text, to be destructive. Or look at Hobbes last week. We discover that human beings appear to have a whole bunch of desires and motives that result in conflict with one another, right? So what we think is right is we understand as good for us. And if we pursue what's right, by definition, it's going to make us happy, right? Assuming the morality is for us. When we look at a guy like Thrasymachus, who makes a series of laws, they don't benefit the people, they benefit. Did anyone pick up on that? No, that's okay. So
Professor, what just happened?
did something happen?
I don't know.
It kind of froze.
Okay. Everything looks fine on my end. Are we good right now? Should I keep going?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you can keep
Yes,
going.
yes, you're good.
Good.
Yeah, we can.
The internet is back to normal. Something happened in the matrix. So if we assume that the morality is there to benefit us, right? So when we look at Thrasymachus, Jim says, what did Thrasymachus say justice was? Justice was the advantage of the stronger. And he presents a depiction of people making rules or laws, right, that are imposed on the people, we could say, that actually aren't intended to benefit the people, but intended to benefit the rulers who are the stronger ones, right? So you can ask yourself this question. The people in Washington, are they making laws and a code of justice to benefit us, the people, we the people, or are they making laws to benefit themselves and then coming out and saying, we are doing this for the people, right? And all we're about is for the people. And if you think the answer is number two, that they just say they're making laws for the people, but in fact, they're making laws in their own self-interest, well, what you've done is actually just reiterated what Thrasymachus says people who make the rules do, right? You know, when you have the power, you make the rules to benefit yourself. That's a common theme, right? But if we have rules that are genuinely good for us, then by doing what's right or what's called right, it should lead to our happiness. And what do we all care about? What are we fundamentally concerned with? We're concerned with our happiness, right? That goes for every human being. And justice is what? It's a code imposed on us of right and wrong. You can do this, you can't do that. A bunch of walls, a bunch of boundaries set up, external boundaries set up in terms of our conduct, what we're permitted and not permitted to do, and it inhibits what we're able to do. Okay, so let me just pick up a couple points here, and then we'll read right here. And okay, good. So a little bit about the structure, because once you wade into this reading, it's challenging and it's hard to follow, right? But there's a basic structure at work that once you kind of see that basic structure, things fall into place. So every Platonic dialogue, every text Plato wrote is built around a central question, right? A what is question. And this is a kind of philosophy question. What is thus and so? And so this text is, what's the focus of this text? What is the main topic of their conversation?
They're talking about justice.
Yeah, they're talking about justice. So the question essentially is, what is justice? And Socrates finds a way in his conversation with this character Cephalus. I know the names are torturous, so we'll go over them as we look at it. But Cephalus is the old guy who's the head of the household. And Socrates eventually raises this question of justice. And then after that, the characters, each of them starts raising their own opinion of justice from their own point of view. And then Socrates kind of interrogates them and tries to demonstrate where their claims are not accurate, and, you know, kind of encourages them to modify their understanding and to sharpen it and hone it. And they don't necessarily do that. So the basic structure of this dialogue. So I mean, what are we talking about dialogue? We're talking about back and forth conversation. That's what we mean by dialogue. And there's a kind of more technical term that's used in the Platonic dialogues. When Socrates, the main character of almost all the dialogues, engages in a special kind of conversation with people called a dialectic, which is to say, a dialectic is basically a special kind of dialogue which starts with this what is question. And then we go through this process of question and answer, where the person gives an answer and Socrates says, that's an interesting answer, but have you considered X? Have you considered Y? And then the person says, oh, you're right, I have to change my answer a little bit. So then they change their answer, and then he has another problem with it, and on and on. And the idea is that dialectic is a type of a philosophical type of conversation, grounded in reasoning, logic, evidence, that starts with an opinion and moves to something more like knowledge over the course of the conversation as the initial opinion gets refined and shaped and criticized, basically, into something that is maybe more faithful with the truth of things. What exactly is an opinion? Let's just talk about what's an opinion. What does it mean to be an opinion? And what does it mean to be truth? What is an opinion?
It's just something that you believe and you think it's true. It's not based off of facts or anything. It's just something that you believe to be true.
Yeah, so an opinion could be based in some facts. An opinion is a kind of belief. It's even, you could say, it's a kind of faith, not in necessarily any religious way, but it's not based on any empirical evidence. What could opinions be based on?
Personal experiences, your job, your family, your friends, just who you surround yourself with.
Okay, good. So your opinions emerge out of your own nature, what you're like, and then the context that you grow up in. Think about a lot of beliefs people have are things that they've been handed to by their surroundings, whether it's their parents, teachers, friends, neighborhood, community, church, mosque, synagogue, and so on and so forth, right? And so it's not that there's no evidence for an opinion, right? Because I think if you ran down a list of your opinions, they'd all have some basis in some facts. But what's the difference between opinion on one hand and knowledge? Let me frame it this way. I think or I believe X versus I know Y. What's the difference between opinion and knowledge? Because the whole idea of this dialectic is Socrates says, what is justice? And then someone answers with their opinion. And then in the process of this back and forth conversation, they move from something that's more like opinion to something that's more like real knowledge, real understanding, the truth. What's the difference between the two?
I guess like security.
Let me just say, so Natalie says opinion is based on appearances. And perfect. Opinion is like a seeming. It appears this way to me, but I don't know for sure that that's the truth or that's the reality behind it. Dalen, you were going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was saying that it's based on security and like being able to back it up with facts or, like you said, evidence.
Okay, good. So knowledge is based on being able to produce evidence that what you're claiming is actually the case and that you can demonstrate it to someone else, right? Can your opinions be true? This is kind of a trick question. Can your opinion about something be true?
If you can
No.
prove it.
Oh, not really.
No.
What if you can prove it?
Are you sure about that?
What if you can prove it, Professor?
I mean, what's my opinion is different than your opinion. So opinions always crash.
But
That's
let's see, because we're thinking of just subjective things when we think of opinion. I have an opinion that it's raining outside right now. Can that opinion be true?
Yes.
But wouldn't that not be an opinion though?
Exactly. Maybe we having no idea.
Question. Why don't I know what's the difference here between I believe it's raining and I know it's raining? What's the difference here?
If you say I know that it's raining right now, it's because you're looking out the window and you know that you can see that it's raining.
Exactly. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's not the best example, but when I say I know it's raining, I've got conclusive evidence that I can show you that it's actually raining. You know, I think or I believe it's raining. I don't know. Maybe I don't have a window, but I start hearing a noise that sounds like pitter patter on the roof, right? But I don't actually see outside. And then the funny thing is, I go outside and maybe it's raining, or maybe that pitter patter was, I don't know, a mouse in the house or something, right? So opinions can be true, but you don't know that they're true until they're kind of fed through the process or the rigor of, some type of rational method that that verifies them, right? So this only gets more complicated because questions of what is justice are moral questions about the right way to live, right? And not only are they hard to get knowledge of, there's even a question of, is there really definitive knowledge to be gotten? Because part of justice is often respecting other people's points of view, and respecting other people's points of view means accepting that people have different understandings of morality and justice, and things of that nature. Um, so I want to go through, I think this will be good, just background here, and I'll go through it quickly. So the title of this book, right? This kind of frames the whole discussion they have, the title of this book. It's in English, it's called The Republic. A republic is a special form of like democracy. It's a popular government that serves the people, where the rulers, who are an elite in a republic, are obliged to do things on and to rule on behalf of the people at large, right? So the United States is a republic, and ideally, those people in Washington are supposed to make laws that benefit us. And there's all kinds of mechanisms, whether it's the Constitution or the checks and balances of the separation of the three branches of government. They're all designed to help guarantee that those people work on our behalf rather than just their own and against our own interest, right? But the actual Greek word for the book is this word politeia, which we're going to come in contact with again. And politeia means like form of government, constitution, regime, or most generally way of life, how people live. And the reason there's a connection between the form of government and the way people live for the Greeks is that the form of government completely defined how people would live, starting with whatever form of government is, there's a specific group of people who are then making the laws. And when they make the laws, what do? They shape the way you live, right? And on what basis do they make the laws? They make the laws on the basis of their understanding of happiness. If we think X is what happiness is, then we're going to make laws in accordance with that understanding that helps to contribute to bringing about that type of happiness, right? And if, just like justice, there's a problem. We don't all see happiness in the same way. And one interesting thing about all these characters is they actually, most of them except Socrates, sees justice as an inhibition on their own happiness. Justice gets in the way of what they want to do. Because what does justice tell everybody? Don't do this, don't do that, thou shalt not, right? And of course, our natural inclination is what? What do we all want to do? If we could. What do we all
for ourselves, I guess.
Pardon?
Look out for ourselves. Just
Yeah,
kind of the way
definitely look out for ourselves. So that at the heart of the problem of justice is this theme of self-love. We want to do we want to do things that benefit us. And frankly, if we could, so Jim says it. He's got a real cynical mind, I can see. He says we all want to do the wrong thing and get away with it, right? And at the heart of this whole discussion is what would their kind of presumption lurking there is that what we really want to do that makes us happy is whatever we want. And justice constantly tells us, thou shalt not, that you can't do it, right? So it gets in the way of our own happiness, right? And Socrates has to argue why having justice or being just is a good thing, right? To a bunch of characters who say, no, justice is no good for me because doesn't let me do what I want. So in a sense, it's a really radical conversation, because if you really start thinking, what would these people want to do if they could, you start coming up with a lot of very crazy, maybe even diabolical kind of stuff. Okay. How would you define, so it's interesting. The question in this dialogue is, what is justice? But the funny thing is they do have a kind of baseline understanding of either what justice is or how it functions. What they disagree on is the details about the exact definition of justice. Like I'll give you an example. We all know what happiness is in the general sense, and we all agree in the general sense on happiness is the satisfying state of existence that we all want. But there's going to be a huge difference if we ask each person more specifically, like, well, what is happiness to you? How do you define it? Right? So that's the level of disagreement that they're on, like how they define the details. But in general, how do we define like what justice is? Does anyone have any thoughts about that? What does it have to do with?
It's basically making things like fair and like making things right
Okay,
for
good.
everyone involved.
Has to do with fairness, has to do with making things right. What else? If we can't come up with a definition, like what are some issues or associations we make with this concept?
Pain and pleasure.
Okay, law.
Talking about the first question, Professor, what do we do about, what do we care about justice?
Let's come back to that one, because that's the juicy one that they're all getting at.
Oh, I kind of missed the question, sorry.
You know what? It should be, why do we care about justice? Because they're asking that very question. Why should we care about being just? Why should we follow the rules of justice? I want to do what I want, right?
I was gonna say because there's laws, that's why, and
okay, very good. There's already laws, so we got to follow them, and
right,
and you don't want to get punished. So that's why I care about justice. But they're having I wouldn't underestimate how radical this conversation is, because here you are with people who could actually, these are some powerful, these are kind of like the elite of Athenian society. And these are people who actually did historically have roles to play in Athenian politics. And they could shape the very definition of justice, not just in conversation, but in fact. So when they talk about why should I care about justice, I mean, they're raising a question of maybe devising a system of life where they get to do what they want at the expense of everybody else. And if you look at Thrasymachus, or if you look at Gyges in book 2, where he gets this ring that makes him invisible, you start to see some of the problems here. They don't assume, see, when you say you want to follow the rules, you're already assuming some kind of generic set of rules that you're obliged to follow. They're having, by radical, like getting to the root of it, radical. They're having a conversation where they're calling into question some of the most basic assumptions about justice. So we'll come back to that question, because we're going to see that throughout the reading, which we'll turn to in just a moment. what other associations do we have with this concept of justice?
I associate with like consequences.
Consequences called what? What are the consequences of justice?
You get punished for it. So you can go to jail, you can receive a ticket.
Yeah, great, great. Let's put it this way: rewards and punishments. Rewards and punishments. Right? Any other thoughts? And let's be clear how this connects, because this connects back with Hobbes. Rewards produce pleasure. Punishments produce pain. In our path through life, we want to avoid pain and get more pleasure, right? So there's two ways by which you might get pleasure rather than pain. One is to follow the rules and be rewarded. Second is to commit crimes that you really want to commit and get away with them so you're not punished. Or maybe even better yet, be the person in power and make the rules in conformity with your own desires so you can do what you want, but nobody can do it back to you. Right? That's what Thrasymachus starts talking about. And that's a pretty radical thing. So yeah, justice has to do with law, right? The rules of society. So here's one good general definition of justice here. The second bullet point. It's the distribution of rewards and punishments through society based on the rules and people's conduct. So the justice system, one kind or another, sets up a set of rules, whatever they are, right? It could be you come up with whatever you want. And then based on people's conduct, they're either going to conform with the rules or they're going to break the rules. And then they get rewarded or punished based on how they act, right? And it's a whole system. And in fact, if we look to last week, we can see exactly why we need a system of justice. Why do we need a system of justice?
Because if not, people are going to go around doing whatever it is that they want to do. And then there's not going to be any consequences. So it's just going to be super chaotic.
Yeah, we'll be in the state of nature, which turned out to be what? A state of
Survival.
Misery.
Can it be more crime?
Yeah, a state of misery, a state of crime, a state of war, right? He explicitly says it's a state of war. Are there consequences for not having justice in our society?
Yes.
Or no? Are there consequences for having no government and no justice system in our society?
Yes.
Absolutely. And guess what? For Hobbes' argument is that the consequences of not having government and a system of justice are so bad that human beings are just begging to have laws imposed on them because the loss of some of those freedoms is outweighed by the benefits gained by the peace that's created from the justice system. So obviously, when you have a justice system, you've got a government telling you can't do stuff, where in the state of nature, you could do whatever you want. So the state of nature is so warlike, it's so miserable, rather than felicitous or happy, that we're willing to accept the rules because it's so, the little bit that's taken away from us is a worthwhile sacrifice compared to all the misery of the state of nature, right? And so some of these characters start talking about, I don't like justice, it doesn't benefit me. I want to be the fool, Hobbes' fool. I want to commit the crime and get away with it. I want to game the system. Things like that. There's a couple more points. So ironically, they do establish a kind of definition of justice. The other characters besides Socrates, they seem to have this definition of happiness, which is like doing what I want, and not just what I want, but whatever I want. And so this is an interesting question. And we'll see this in Aristotle's Ethics. Is happiness doing whatever you want, comma, will happiness be produced doing whatever you want? What do people think? That's not an easy question.
Not really.
No.
So I hear no's. Does anyone want to say yes?
What was the question, Professor? Sorry, I stepped out.
So in the context of this dialogue, the characters seem to have an implicit definition of happiness, which is doing what they want. And the problem is the rules of justice get in the way of them doing what they want. So then they ask this question, why should I follow justice at all? Because it doesn't benefit me, because justice is there to protect the other guy from my naughty actions, right? So, the premise here is that happiness is doing whatever you want. And I'm questioning that premise. I'm raising the question is, will human happiness be produced by doing whatever you want, whenever you want to do it?
No.
Is Omar saying yes to that? Good, we've got one.
No.
Does anyone want to say yes to that?
Answer is no.
So everybody says except Omar. Okay, so then the question is, why not? Why isn't doing whatever we want? If you think of like, I'm a little kid, I'm a 6-year-old, doing whatever what I want seems like the very definition of happiness, because they have an impulse to do something to that effect.
I mean, it's similar to justice because, again, if you do whatever you want all the time and no one, I guess, like tells you otherwise, you won't have a balance. Like similar to justice, there's no balance in, I guess, like having, if there's no government, if there are no rules in place.
No. So let's say we're in the context. Yeah, that's tricky.
I think also if you are free to do whatever you want, eventually you will get so used to it that you're no longer entertained by it.
Yeah, and you know what happens then? You have to come up with more radical pleasures to satisfy your growing perverse, for lack of a better word, perverse desires, because everything in humanity is about like getting habituated to something. It's like if you were used to drinking 5 glasses of wine, having 1 glass wouldn't do anything. But if you're used to not normally drinking, having 1 glass can get you very drunk.
Or if you drink so much that eventually you're so over it that you want to try or indulge with something completely different.
Yeah, and then the alcohol doesn't work at all, and you have to go to the next gear, which happens to a lot of people. What other reasons for no? Why doing whatever you want is not gonna produce happiness for you?
I think going back to last week in Hobbes, what if doing what I want interferes with what you want?
Okay.
Then it goes back to whoever's stronger.
This is exactly why we have justice, because this is really crucial here in Hobbes and Plato. They both acknowledge we have desires that result in stepping on other people's toes, to put it kind of metaphorically. And there's 2 things. There's one instance where I'm pursuing what I want and I just happen to step on your toes. There's another one where my pleasure involves stepping on your toes. Do we see the difference there? Like, for example, you happen to have something I want and I steal it. I'm not doing it because I really want to hurt your feelings. I'm doing it just because I want the thing you have, and you're the guy or the girl who happens to have it. But then there's another person who actually takes pleasure in, I don't really care about that thing I'm stealing from you. I want to steal it from you because I want to put you down, right? Or I want to bonk you on the head because I don't like you, right?
So how do you differentiate those 2 pleasures?
Oh, they're pretty different. The consequence for the other person could be very similar, right? doesn't matter what the intention of the person was. You get something stolen and you're not happy about it. So why do we have justice? Because we have desires that, if unleashed or not contained with external boundaries like laws, they would harm other people, right? We all accept that, right? Or no? Do we need good fences to be good neighbors?
I think so.
Yeah, we
Yes.
do. We
Yes.
definitely do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're all like realists here.
Mhm.
That's probably a good thing.
Not everybody's the same. Everyone has different personalities. or
Oh, well, I mean,
beliefs.
I wouldn't say that everybody would agree with that at the end of the day. So let me backtrack a second here. Why should we abide by let's ask this question that they're really, the question seems to be, what is justice? I would say that the real question is, they all kind of know what justice is. It's a set of rules that imposes restrictions on people without getting into the details, and you get punished if you break them. The real question that seems to be asked here is, why should we follow justice at all? Why should we follow justice? Does anyone have a good, wholesome answer to that question? Why
Um,
should we follow
pers-
the rules?
Personally, I think like we only follow the rules because of the punishment.
Okay,
But that's only
so
like
let's stop right there.
the first level, and then like the second level is like ethics and how you were raised, and then because like no human is born evil. Like they're like they have.
Okay. So you said a lot of things. No human is born evil. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't reached a conclusion on that.
Yeah, actually, I don't know about that either, because there are some people that are kind of chemically imbalanced, which
I would
but
say, on the whole,
Yeah.
in the Federalist Papers that explains the Constitution,
mhm.
it says people aren't perfect, but they're not diabolical devils either. Most everybody's kind of in the middle, which is to say, we do wrong things all the time. We commit little transgressions, but they're fairly ordinary transgressions that we all kind of live with. But then there are definitely those people who are interested in more radical, more diabolical transgressions. And maybe those are the people we really got to watch out for, and not the ordinary. So why do we follow justice? Number one, we don't want to get punished because we prefer pleasure and we fear punishment. Think about what Hobbes said about fear. His goal was to set up a system that actually instilled fear in people that would scare them straight, you might say, scare them on the straight and narrow path of following the law, but especially when the police weren't around. So one answer to follow justice is we don't want to get punished. The other answer is we want to follow it based on principle, right? Which is, I know what the right thing to do is. The laws of our community are just, they're righteous, and I want to follow them because that's simply the right thing to do. Do people normally, what motive is more powerful with human beings? The first one or the second one? What do you think anyway? So Diego says the second, that the one just simply to do the right thing is the more powerful motive.
I think the threat of punishment's the most powerful one.
What do you think Hobbes says? Which one is it?
I believe so. Thank you, baby. Give me a kiss.
Number one or two, threat of punishment or the principle of doing the right thing?
Hobbes would say the threat of punishment.
I think
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because he doesn't believe in like that humans can actually overcome things and like self-actualize and like reach that level. He's really cynical about it.
I agree with your point. I don't think I agree totally with the description, but it's a good one. He seems to think of people as like little rational calculators who are constantly trying to get our best benefit we can. And if we can rationally calculate to maximize our pleasure, we're just going to do that. And part of maximizing our pleasure is avoiding pain, which is to say avoiding punishment. So when Hobbes has people avoid do the right thing, it's strictly as a rational calculation of what best serves their interest rather than doing it for its own sake of the principle itself. He doesn't seem to acknowledge the principle itself very much at all. I mean, we didn't read all of his text, but that passage, those passages we read, give a good flavor of it. So let's be a little more radical now, because this is where it goes in book 2 with the Ring of Gyges. The question becomes, can anyone tell the story of Gyges here? What is the little myth? I know.
The ring,
Yes.
Okay.
Gyges is this mythic character.
that was crazy.
The story that is told is very much like a little bit like the Lord of the Rings, and probably Lord of the Rings stole this story. When it's probably not a completely original story. It's probably got many versions in different cultures and whatnot. What's the story of Gyges and his ring?
The ring that he found on the corpse, that if he turns the ring towards him, he's invisible. And if he turns the ring away from him, he's visible.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And so Gyges get this ring. It makes him invisible. What does he do with the ring?
he deceives the king, he steals his wife, and he kills the king to take over.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. And so there's a specific order. So he's invisible. What is the invisibility here is to be taken somewhat literally, but mostly metaphorically. What is the invisibility all about? What does it permit him to do that he can't do when he's visible?
Injustice, right?
Yes, but why? Absolutely.
For his own pleasure.
Why else would we commit injustice?
No one's seeing what he's doing, so he won't
get caught.
Yeah.
Yes. It allows him to avoid the consequences of actions that are considered wrong, right? Or that people are going to determine are wrong, or that people aren't going to like, right? So it's a whole mechanism. The invisibility is either literally he's invisible to the eyes of the law, or it represents a kind of power, in the sense it's a power to do whatever he wants or do what he wants and avoid the consequences, avoid the law, avoid other people getting angry at him, and so on and so forth. Let's just be clear. He's now in a situation where he can avoid punishment when he's invisible. What's the first thing he does?
Sleeps with the king's wife.
Yeah, and more generally, we'll come to the sex part in a second. That's really important. When he's invisible, what does he do? Does he do justice or injustice?
Injustice.
Injustice. Obviously, Professor, duh, of course he does. He's invisible. He can do whatever he wants. What does this say about his motive for being just when he's visible?
Harming others.
Yeah, so when there are no consequences, he has no problem with harming others. What the fact that he does injustice when he's invisible says something about his motivation for being just in the first place when he is just. Now remember, so I kind of got it we're just kind of talking this out. I could have been a little more formal, but
Right. So
let me just say this. When he's visible, how does he act?
Normal. You follow the law. The rules.
Absolutely. He follows the law. Yes. So Diego says fake. This is important. How well does he follow the law when he's visible?
he doesn't follow it
When
properly.
he's visible. When he's visible.
Oh, when he's visible, he follows it.
Yeah, and not only does he follow it a little bit, he tries to present himself as the most righteous member of the community. And
He puts himself on a pedestal.
he garners a reputation
Mhm.
amongst everyone else, because when they see him, the appearance, their opinion, as opposed to knowledge, when they see him, they go, oh, it's Gyges. He's the king now. He's the most righteous man in the community. And why? Because whenever I actually see him, he's always making donations to charity, and he's curing the sick, and so on and so forth. You know, like Bill Gates, something like that. Or I don't know, Hillary Clinton with their Clinton Foundation, where they're donating money to the Haitian community to help them out, apparently. So why does he act so well when he's visible? Why does he act so? Let's be obvious. If he committed crimes when he was visible, what would happen to him?
He'll be exposed.
He'll be punished.
Yeah, you know,
Punished.
And he'll be punished.
He'll be punished. Whatever. Get killed or thrown in jail, and the lock. You know, the key gets thrown away. They lock him up and throw away the key. So what is he doing? Yeah, he's cultivating trust with people, and he's maintaining the appearance
A
of
positive reputation around others.
a
Yeah.
positive reputation. What do you think politicians spending time they're doing when they talk about, you know, all the wonderful things they're going to do for the people, right? But
Yep.
when you can't see him, when he's in the back room with the smoke, you know, from all the cigars, cutting deals with people, he's doing something very different, right?
So
And of
he's
course-
basically a politician then.
Well, look at the context. He becomes a king, right? Political power, right? And the whole context here is of justice and people talking about what the right system of justice is. Tony,
So that
Huh.
so his characteristics change.
absolutely. Well, I mean, they don't really change. His superficial characteristics really change, but he's still the same person. It's just that
But
he's
by that conversation, you could see his intent though.
yes, absolutely. So he's exploiting the situation. He's trying to maximize his gain. And the way he maximizes his gain is by looking good in public and being a hypocrite, and then in private and doing all kinds of diabolical things. Right? You know, I don't know. Maybe, well, I don't want to. There's examples from our own public life that I would mention, but
Okay, we're adults.
leave it. Well, you know, there's certain characters who I don't have like conclusive evidence that they're really scoundrels, but I have my suspicions based on stuff I see. And you know, let's just say people who have garnered an incredible reputation for good works. Think about Mother Teresa. Everybody knows who Mother Teresa is?
Yes.
I mean, in my generation, she was still alive. You know, she is now a Catholic saint, and she did charity work and went to, I don't know if it's Africa for a good bit of her life, but it's turning out now that her organization has been involved in human trafficking and so on and so forth. And I don't know if that's just like an incident that developed after she died, or whether that institution that was involved in that trafficking was leveraging her image to conceal what was really going on underneath, right? And I think this happens more often than you might realize,
Yeah.
precisely because you're used to seeing that beautiful image of the person, and you never get to see what they're doing because they're invisible, right? And the invisibility is about literally you can't see what they're doing, but also about the power to conceal, right? So we know that when Gyges does whatever he wants, that he doesn't care about the principle of justice. He just doesn't want to get punished, right? When he does whatever he wants, when he can avoid it. What's the significance? So this is the other part we've mentioned. Everyone's mentioned it. That the first thing, it's not just that he commits injustice, it's the injustices he commits, right? So number one, he sleeps with the queen, and because he slept with the queen, she says, you know, you have you've stolen my virtue. Let's put it that way. You've tainted me. So I can't be with my husband now. Either you kill him or he's going to kill you. So go do the deed. And then what he does, he kills the king and becomes king himself. Any thoughts about why these two acts of injustice are chosen, depictions of what he does? The first chance he gets the opportunity to be invisible and commit crime, he doesn't go and steal a pack of gum at the 7-Eleven. He doesn't go to the bank and rob the bank and get money. He
Takes a life.
he sleeps with a woman and then gets political power. And let's just say there's also an ambiguity in the text when it says he sleeps with her. Because when you think about the actual circumstance of that, it sounds more like rape, right? But this is Plato. He's not going to come out and spell that out. But I think it's debatable exactly that nature of that relationship. But by rape, I mean, like against her consent, he can force himself on her because there's no consequence. Any thoughts about why it's those two transgressions? Think about what he does. He's committing a coup. He's not just taking a woman's virtue and maybe raping her, but then he's also committing a coup and overthrowing the power structure and putting himself in power. Any thoughts about why those two injustices, as opposed to stealing a pack of smokes at the at the gasoline station?
Well, because killing the king, not only did he benefit being a king, he also benefited by taking his wife. So he benefited in two different ways.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm talking about here is the specific goals of all the things he could have done. Think it's kind of like a situation where it's Aladdin's lamp and you get your wishes. The invisibility gives you the power to do what you want. Of all the things he could have wanted to do, he did these two things. Any thoughts about what Plato is trying to tell us by having this character do those two things?
He wanted power, and like he wanted, like he had lust, and he wanted power. I forgot, well, that's like greed kind of.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep it simple. Plato seems
like carnal.
Good. Any other thoughts there about why these two?
Yeah, they're just like primitive, like desires that like people want. Like,
so lust and power are immoral. Adultery is immoral. Yeah. So I think he's getting at it. I mean, these are two really primal desires. Number one, sex, lust, and number two, political power, right? Or ambition to have power, right? When you're the king, you've got more power than everybody else, right? So it seems to signify kind of two core human ambitions: a desire for sex, and not just sex of, this isn't consensual sex here. This is because he has a certain type of power of invisibility. He takes something that's not his. Think about what Cuomo is being accused of right now. I mean, not to pick on him because there's a million politicians and celebrities you could pick on, but the celebrities get their and the politicians get their own type of power, and then they act like they have access to other people because they can impose themselves on other people because they're important. And of course, a lot of times they get away with it, well, because people conceal it, right? Even the media conceals it. Right. There was a huge story, I guess it was like a year and a half ago, about how the whole Jeffrey Epstein story was canned by CBS, of all, the media, and concealed the story. And of course, Jeffrey Epstein, this sex trafficker, sex slaver, that's what it is, sex slavery. You think slavery is bad, then add the sex to it and it makes it even worse and more despicable. And then the people are young and they're female, and that makes it even more despicable. And here it is, CBS. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't a lone wolf. He had a lot of powerful connections and buddies like Bill Clinton, like Bill Gates, like all kinds of people who flew on his plane that you can go look at the
Bill
list.
Clinton too.
Yeah, Bill Clinton, and not just Democrats, Republicans, you name it. There's no it's equal opportunity when it comes to the political spectrum. And CBS, the media presents itself as the great bastion of truth in our society, at least rhetorically. They present themselves as, we're going to speak truth to power. We're going to expose things to the light so the people know what's really going on so they can make good decisions when they enter the voting booth. And here, one of the biggest stories of our generation, CBS said, the journalist put together all the facts, had it all lined up to do a special, story on it. And CBS said, sorry, we're not doing it. Right. And, what are they doing if not protecting people by doing that? So the media has its own cloak of invisibility, and they are, in a sense, the cloak of invisibility in our society, sadly. And I hate to say it, I've come to discover this in recent years, some of the things they've done, some of the things they've concealed, right? They've gone along with things, that are not true. And they seem to be in the business partially of actually protecting the powerful rather than speaking truth to the powerful people. It's just the opposite of what they claim.
But if we have those type of personalities and people with those tendencies, I think that we would not have had to instill laws, right? We have laws because of those human behaviors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And see, here's the problem. What happens when it's the people in power who are making the laws or connected with those are the ones that are doing the bad things, and they can shape the circumstance so that they can do what they want. So when you look at this situation with this character Thrasymachus, where he says justice is the advantage of the stronger, and he says explicitly that the stronger, they rule, they make laws that serve themselves and their own benefit and actually harm the people. But then they actually go out and tell the people that these laws benefit them.
Mm-hmm. Deception.
Right? Yeah. And he has this whole metaphor of the shepherd and the sheep. And you have this image of like the shepherd taking care of the flock. Well, he uses this metaphor. The shepherd is actually more like a wolf, or like the shepherd fleeces the sheep, takes their wool, which is a kind of metaphor for taking their property. And it might not just be their property, it might be their persons in slavery, or it might be their women because, well, they want them, or something like that. If the people are unable to, how are the people going to be able to fight back if they actually believe those laws are good for them? The very laws that are exploiting them, right? Actually, Karl Marx talked a lot about, this idea of false consciousness, people's lack of awareness of how the system is really, the system always presents itself as beneficial to you, right? Every system would. It would be foolish not to. But that doesn't mean every system is beneficial to you, the people, because there can only be so many rulers and so on.
But Professor, I have a really quick question, right?
Yes.
Going back a little bit to what you said before about, how, I kind of lost my train of thought, but it was really important because in the book, when you read the beginning, it talks about like this age have something to do with this, because when you read the beginning of the chapter and a question was asked, now that you're old, how you look at life now, is there a difference? Would our happiness differ because of our age? Because when you read the chapter, you see how the older he was, he said, no, like my desire for lust and stuff changed.
Cephalus, right? You're talking about Cephalus?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
in the beginning, I was thinking about that. Like, does age like affect that type of thinking or the type of happiness? Because if we didn't have rules installed and our happiness could lead to stepping on each other or harming somebody else, does age factor into it?
Okay, so let's just put it this way. I think we should finish the class actually just by reading the first few pages, because actually in the first few pages is contained a lot of what we've been discussing that then plays out later on. And Plato, you raised a very interesting question. And Plato makes this observation about Cephalus. Something's changed because he's older. And the question is, what is it? And it affects his happiness. And what do we all want? We all want to be happy, right? So Cephalus is feeling a certain threat to his happiness and he's concerned about it. It has something to do with his age, but I don't want to say any more than that because I'll give it away, because there's a crucial fact about why his age is relevant. And it's not just that he's older. It's the, well, I don't want, why don't we just read? Let me bring up the text here and see if I can actually switch this up. Acrobat Reader. There we go. So who would like to, could someone read for us? Could I have a volunteer to read for us?
I can read.
Natalie?
Yes.
Great, go for it.
Socrates, I went to the Pyrrhus yesterday.
Yep.
Praeus with Glaucon, son of Ariston, to pray to the goddess. And at the same time, I wanted to observe how they would put on the festival since they were now holding it for the first time. Now, in my opinion, the procession of the native inhabitants was fine, but the one that Thracians conducted was no less fitting a show. After we had prayed and looked on, we went off toward town. Continue.
Yes, please.
Catching. Oh,
Sorry,
the screen went black.
Yep.
Mama is finished.
There we go.
And I hear the fire alarm in the background.
Living in the Bronx, sorry. Catching sight of us from afar as we were presenting homeward, Polemarchus, son of
Marcus, yes.
Cephalus. Can we call him Marcus for short? Son of Cephalus ordered his slave boy to run after us and to order us to wait for him. The boy took hold of my cloak from behind and said, Polemarchus orders you to wait. And I turned around and asked him where his master was. He is coming up behind, he said, just wait. Of course we'll wait, said Glaucon. A moment later, Polemarchus came along with Adeimantus, Glaucon's brother, Niceratus, son of Nicias, and some others, apparently from the procession. Polemarchus said, Socrates, I guess you two are hurrying to get away to town. That's not a bad idea, I guess. That's not a bad guess, I said. Well, he said, do you see how many of us there are? Of course. Well then, he said, either prove stronger than these men or stay here.
Okay. So Polemarchus, so remember Socrates here is narrating the story and then he's providing the comment, the dialogue. And Socrates is, he's in this place called the Piraeus, which is the port near Athens. And they've been watching this festival, right? You know, like, I don't know, like Mardi Gras type festival. And it's kind of spectacular. It's a spectacle. And Socrates, and he's with Glaucon, who turns out to be Plato's brother. And Socrates is ready to go back to downtown Athens and leave. And Cephalus is, and his son, Polemarchus, they're inhabitants of the Piraeus. And Polemarchus, you can see he's got an attitude. He's young. He's like a young man. And he's got this kind of attitude about him. He's kind of ambitious. He demands Socrates stop and talk to him, despite the fact that Socrates would prefer to go home, as he's indicated. And, you know, Socrates indicates that he'd rather go home right now. And Polemarchus says, well, do you see how many of us there are? That seems like a throwaway line, but what is he saying when he says that?
That's a threat.
That's a threat, which you wouldn't expect because it seems like a kind of congenial situation, but he threatens him. And I don't know, sometimes they interpret it as he's joking, but it's one of those jokes that doesn't come off as just funny. It also comes off as like a little sinister, and that he kind of means it. Um, what is the threat? What is the implication here?
That he has to fight him off if he wants to leave town.
And what's the problem with them fighting?
Just he's outnumbered.
Yeah, there's two of them, and there's many of us. And if you want to go down that route, we can beat you up. So look what he says. He says, well, then, he said, either prove stronger than these men or stay here. And of course, this already raises justice is the advantage or the interest of the stronger. And of course, the question is, what does the stronger mean? Stronger here means
Power.
physically stronger, right? But of course, there's also other types of strength. And, Socrates has intellectual strength to argue with them. So why don't I'll have to move it down when we get there. Could you keep going, Natalie?
Isn't there still one other possibility? I said, our persuading you that you must let us go. Could you really persuade, he said, if we don't listen? There's no way, said Glaucon.
Great. So, stronger. Polymarchus is about physical power and physical might. He says, we got you outnumbered. And Socrates' response is, well, he doesn't say it, but he recognizes he's not going to physically fight these people. First of all, it's just irrational. And second of all, he doesn't have the numbers on his side. So he has to persuade him to let him go. And so that turns out to be another type of power, the power of persuasion, right? And of course, what's the relationship between the power of words and persuasion and the power of physical brute strength, right? And what's Glaucon's answer? Could I give you an argument as to why you should let me go home? That's Socrates. He's a philosopher, right? He's kind of weird, right? And Polymarchus says, what if we don't listen? Right? Which is to say, we don't care what you have to say. Odd beginning here. Interesting conflict. You want to keep going, Natalie?
Sure. Well, then, think it over, bearing in mind we won't listen. Then Adeimantus said, is it possible you don't know that a sunset there will be a torch race on horseback for the goddess? On horseback, I said? That is novel. Will they hold torches and pass them to one another while racing the horses? Or what do you mean? That's it, said Polymarchus. And besides, they'll put on an all-night festival that will be worth seeing. We'll get up after dinner and go see it. There we'll be together with many of the young men and we'll talk. So stay and do as I tell you. And Glaucon said, it seems we must stay. Well, if it is so resolved, I said, that's how we must act.
So did they have a choice about staying?
It doesn't seem so.
No, right? But they kind of create a pretext that makes it sound like they're choosing to stay, despite the fact that everybody knows that there's no choice about whether they stay because of this threat that's been made. So it actually does seem like a real threat because they comply with it, right? And
they comply with it, but they're also entertained by it because they're attending the horse.
But that's why I call that a pretext. They make an excuse as to why they can stay because they wanted to see the horse race, which is
I didn't get that. Okay, yeah.
It's this issue of consent, right?
Yeah.
They create the appearance of choice and consent by saying, "Oh yeah, all along we wanted to stay for this horse race." And
in the Bronx, we say that's the I don't know in general, but that's the front.
Yep,
is the horse race.
Yeah, it's
I get that one though.
You look at someone makes you the threat, and then you look at your watch and you go, "Oh, I've got plenty of time to stay. Whatever you want to talk about. No, really, I don't have to be back home." to kind of just minimize what happened. I mean, Socrates seems to like seeing these kind of things, but he did sound like he wanted to go home before. And so think about justice. Justice is this is compulsion here, or force. Justice, when you break the rules, you don't have a choice about whether you get to follow them or not. You want to keep going, Natalie?
Sure. Well, if it is so resolved, I said, that's how we must act. Then we went to Polemarchus' home. There we found Lysias and Euthydemus, Polemarchus' brother, and in addition, Thrasymachus, the Chalcedonian, and Carmantides, the Paeanian.
Doing great, though, I have to say.
Actually, you're doing a very good job. And
It really is.
Thank you. The Cleitophon,
and
the son. Say that again, Professor.
Cleitophon.
Cleitophon, the son of Aristonomus.
Yes.
Cephalus.
Yeah, Cephalus or Cephalus, either one.
Cephalus, okay. Cephalus, Polemarchus' father, was also at home, and he seemed very old to me, for I had not seen him for some time. He was seated on a sort of cushioned stool and was crowned with a wreath, for he had just performed the sacrifice in the courtyard. We sat down beside him, for some stools were arranged in a circle there. As soon as Cephalus saw me, he greeted me warmly and said,
now let's just wait, because this is a little detail that you could read over, and it turns out to be really significant. He was seated, Cephalus was seated on a cushion with a crown, a wreath on his head, and he had just performed a sacrifice in the courtyard of his home. What's the sacrifice all about? This is ancient pagan religion.
Not killing a chicken or a rooster, not those kind of sacrifices, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
You know, like,
I mean, that's what I thought, but then I'm like, nah.
Maybe a goat or something like that.
Yeah.
Pretty much,
And of
honestly.
course, you sacrifice a chicken, a turkey at Thanksgiving, right? You just don't kill it yourself. So, I mean, a lot of times when you sacrificed farm animals, you ate them afterwards. So there was like a practical relationship with the sacrifice. Think about Jesus. He's the last sacrifice. And then what is the altar in the church? What is that originally for? What is an altar?
A sacrifice.
Yeah, that's a table on which you do the sacrifices. And in Christianity, it's all symbolic. Like Jesus is sacrificed on the cross. He died for our sins. And that means no more human sacrifices going forward. So here we're not talking about human. I don't know, a bull or a chicken or what have you. Why is he making sacrifices? What's this all about? Jim says worship and sacrifices. Can we put that in a whole sentence? What's he doing here?
Is he worshiping a god?
Yes. Why? Let's hope so, because otherwise it's like a little perverse.
And wanting to do good for the people?
Why is he making sacrifices to a god?
I mean, it's a holiday. It's a special holiday.
It could be, but not necessarily.
Maybe to I was thinking maybe to ask forgiveness or something.
For protection.
I mean, what is a sacrifice? It's a kind of gift. It's a kind of offering. Technical term is like a votive offering. Nina, if you have to go, people, we'll just go a few more minutes here and call it a night. So you make an offering to the gods. Why? Because you want to keep the gods happy. Because when the gods aren't happy, they might punish you, right?
You want to stay in their good graces.
Yes. I mean, that is the basic function of various types of sacrifices and prayers. They're all types of kind of you're making gifts, or you're asking things from the gods for on your own behalf, right? So what did someone say? He's making a sacrifice because of guilt?
Yeah, I said for forgiveness.
Oh, forgiveness. Perfect. Right? So, I mean, in the ancient world, you would kind of absolve yourself of any wrongdoing by making sacrifices to the gods. So it suggests immediately that he has some motivation to make the sacrifice, that maybe he's done something wrong in his life. And I think it's going to turn out that he definitely has done something wrong in his life. And that will become clearer. And this comes back to the age issue as to why it's not clear. Let's put it this way. It's not clear that he was always so pious in his life when he was younger. It's not clear that he was making a lot of sacrifices when he was younger, right? Yeah, you think about what confession is. You go there to absolve yourself of your sins, and or even in Renaissance Europe, you could literally buy something from the church, an indulgence to like absolve you of your sins, right? Because you don't want to be why do you not want to have why do you want to be absolved of your sins? If you have sins, what's going to happen to you?
You're gonna go to hell.
Yeah. And so this is not the Christian world here of ancient Greece. They have Greek religion, but they have their own concepts of heaven and hell. So let's read just another little bit longer and we'll call it a night. Is Natalie still here?
Socrates, yes. Socrates, you don't come down to the Piraeus very often. You ought to. Now, if I still had the strength to make the trip to town easily, there would be no need for you to come here. Rather, we would come to you. As it is, however, you must come here more frequently. I want you to know that I want you to know that as the other pleasures, those connected with the body, wither away in me, the desires and pleasures that have to do with speeches grow the more. Now do as I say, be with these young men, but come here regularly to us as to friends and your very own kin.
Okay, so some people mentioned this in the chat earlier. So he's an old in connection with his age. So as he gets older, certain pleasures seem to kind of die or not be so prominent. And what are we talking about here? What kind of pleasures and desires?
Sexual desires, I'm
Yes,
guessing.
sexual. And I think he may also be talking about like eating and drinking and feasting and having a good time.
Having fun.
Also sex seems to be less important. And he says that like intellectual things like speech and talking to people, understanding of one's life. I mean, this raises an interesting question. Like he wants this understanding. Now we want to do the right thing. We want happiness. But the question is, we don't know exactly what the right thing to do is. We need to, happiness has two problems. One, it's not easy to do the right thing, right? I think everybody recognizes that. But two, sometimes it's not always clear what the right thing to do is. And we have to discern what it is through our experiences and our reflection on our experiences. And Cephalus now as an old man is starting to reflect on things a little bit because he's concerned about his happiness and the future prospects of his happiness. Let's put it that way, as a man who's rather old.
My perception with that paragraph was that he was concerned with what he's done in his past and feeling the need to do the right thing now and follow God so he can go to heaven versus going to hell. That was what I gathered from that.
I totally agree with you. I'm stunned that you got it from that paragraph because as we go on in just 5 more minutes, we'll see him pretty much explicitly address this issue that you're talking about here, which explains why his age matters because he's old and he's on the verge of what?
Dying.
Yeah, he's not like going to die tomorrow.
Yeah, but he's being remorseful for what he's done in his past.
He sees it on the horizon and he knows his days are marked, his days are numbered, right? So he's got a certain amount of time to kind of like make things right with the Lord or with the gods. Can you keep going, Natalie?
For my part, Cephalus, I am really delighted to discuss with the very old, I said, since they are like men who have proceeded on a certain road that perhaps we too will have to take. One ought, in my opinion, to learn from them what sort of road it is, whether it is rough and hard or easy and smooth.
Okay.
From you and
So old people have been down a long road, and Socrates says, Cephalus, you're older than I am. Socrates isn't young, but Cephalus is even older than him. And you've been around the block more than I have. You have the wisdom. I want to learn at your feet, right? What is this long road that Cephalus has been down? It's a metaphor here.
his life.
Yes, it's the path of life. And it raises this basic question for happiness. The question is, what is the right way to live? Which is to say, what is the right path for us in life, right? Is it the hard road or is it the easy road? And let me just give this, that Plato kind of has an answer to that. Being righteous, being virtuous, and gaining real happiness is not easy. So the good life often involves doing the tough things rather than simply doing the easy things that you want to do, right? Okay, let's keep going and then we'll finish up.
From you in particular, I should like to learn how it looks to you, for you are now at just the time of life.
1 second here. There we go.
The poets call the threshold of old age. It is a hard time of life, or what have you to report of it? By Zeus, I shall tell you just how it looks to me, Socrates, he said. Some of us who are about the same age often meet together and keep up the old proverb. Now then, when they meet, most of the members of our group lament, longing for the pleasures of youth and reminiscing about sex, about drinking bouts and feasts and all that goes with those things of that sort.
Okay, notice the emphasis on the desires of the body and sex, and then connect that in later with the story of Gyges, that the first thing he does when he gets his power to do whatever he wants is either has sex with a woman or rape her, right? So you can see this desire is lurking underneath everybody's psyche.
I think I took a literature class, professor, of like ancient Greek, and it seems like that rape culture, as we would put it now, was very like typical and common. Like when you hooked up with someone, for lack of a better word, sexually, it wasn't normally because of a mutual, I like him, he likes me. It was like obviously a man, and it's like, that's what I want and that's what I'm gonna have.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's no protocols involved. Actually, when we look at the symposium, we'll deal with that. One speech will actually deal very explicitly with that issue.
Okay. They take it hard as though they were deprived of something very important and had then lived well, but are now not even alive. Some also bewail the abuse that old age receives from relatives, and in this key, they sing a refrain about all the evils old age has caused them. But Socrates, in my opinion, these men do not put their fingers on the cause. For if this were the cause, I would too have suffered these same things insofar as they depend on old age, and so would everyone else who has come to this point in life. But as it is, I have encountered others for whom it was not so, especially Sophocles. I was once present when the poet was asked by someone, Sophocles, how are you in sex? Can you still have intercourse with a woman? Silence, man, he said. Most joyfully did I escape it, as though I had run away from a sort of frenzied and savage master. I thought at that time that he had spoken well, and I still do. For in every way, old age brings great peace and freedom from such things. When the desires cease to strain and finally relax, when what Sophocles says comes to pass in every way, It is possible to be rid of very many mad masters. But of these things and of those that
what are the mad masters he's talking about?
his desires.
Yeah, so obviously in particular the sexual impulse, which is very often the most intense and kind of dramatic, makes people do crazy things, um, all kinds of things. So desires. And what are these desires are gonna be the problem for justice, because they're gonna be the things that compel us to overstep our bounds with others and demand that our community puts restrictions, external restrictions on them. So a little bit more here.
But of these things and of those that concern relatives. Wait, is that where I was? Yes, many mad masters. But of these things and of those that concern relatives, there is one just cause, not old age, Socrates, but the character of the human beings. If they are orderly and content with themselves, even old age is only moderately troublesome. If they are not, then both age, Socrates, and youth alike turn out to be hard for that sort.
Okay, so he says what makes life easy when you get older is the character of the human beings. What is he talking about here, character? In Greek, it's ethos, like that bottle of water you get at Starbucks. If they still
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
He says that they're talking about like enduring the problems of old age and the changes that occur. And he says what makes old age easy for people is having good character. It has to do with the character of the human being. Those that are orderly and content with themselves endure old age well. What is character all about? Having character or ethos. Has to do
Like
with personality.
Being content, I guess, or
Happy
finding
with
some sort of
themselves.
peace.
It produces contentment and you could say peace with oneself. It produces it, but what is it? Okay, let me just, character here means like good character. A person who's righteous, a person who's just. Why is the person who's just and righteous and does the right thing, why are they going to be content?
Because I guess they will have like relatively little trouble or worry.
Yeah, good, right? They're not worrying about hellfires. They know they've done the right and independent of the police or the afterlife, they know they've done the right thing. So they can look at themselves and not feel guilt and not feel shame. And they're at ease with themselves because of that. They got nothing to worry about. Right. I mean, they in terms of the things that they can control, right? You can't control everything. So you can't worry about the things you can't control. You try not to, right? So Cephalus is talking about character, and then Socrates is going to turn and say, but Cephalus, you haven't spent your time having good character. You spent your time making money, right? And it seems what matters to you in terms of your happiness, your definition of happiness is money. Because turns out Cephalus is basically.
He was born around money, right?
He was born with a reasonable amount of money. And so his life is kind of oriented toward money. And it's not in this text, but he was an industrialist who actually made weapons. And this whole story happens in the context of actually a famous war in ancient Greece called the Peloponnesian War. And so his life has not been dedicated to doing the right thing. It's been dedicated to making money. Can we read just a little bit more here? And then the funny thing is we're going to see how he uses his money in old age. And it will come full circle and then we'll call it a night. Could you go just a little more, Natalie?
Sure. Then I was full of wonder at what he said, and wanting him to say still more, I stirred him up, saying, Cephalus, when you say these things, I suppose that the many do not accept them from you, but believe rather that it is not due to character that you bear old age so easily, but due to possessing great substance. They say that for the rich, there are many consolations.
What is he saying here? He's saying life is easy for you, not because you pursued good character, but what?
Because he's rich.
Because you're rich.
Yeah. And what, let's just be obvious. What does the wealth provide in old age?
They buy them their way to everything, right?
Yeah. Whether it's creature comforts or little things that make them happy, right? They have money at their disposal to satisfy their desires, right? There's a catch though. Obviously, can money buy you happiness?
No.
It can make
No.
it easier, right? There's a lot of good lines about that. Like money can't buy you love, but it sure as heck can buy everything else and stuff like that.
There's a song that says money can't buy you class.
Uh-huh. So what did we say? Can money buy you happiness?
No.
No, money
No.
can't buy you happiness or class.
Says all us poor people. let's hope it's true. Let's hope it's true.
I say we all test the theory.
Because I don't want those people to be happy. Actually, it's funny. Socrates is a character who's in real life was rather poor. I mean, he lived not like poor, but he lived rather modest means, especially compared to Cephalus. And Socrates is this image of a happy person. So he's pursuing money. Can money buy you happiness? Well, we're going to see what Cephalus does with his money. You want to keep going, Natalie?
What you say is true, he said. They do not accept them, and they do not have something there. They do have something there, but not, however, quite as much as they think. Rather, the saying of Themistocles holds good. When a Seriphian abused him, saying that he was illustrious, not thanks to himself, but thanks to the city, he answered that if he found himself had been a Seriphian, he would not have made a name, nor would that man have made one.
All right, here we go. Let me see if I can do this. There we go.
Had made one had he been an Athenian. At the same argument, and the same argument also holds good for those who are not wealthy and bear old age with difficulty. The decent man would not bear old age with poverty very easily, nor would the one who is not a decent sort ever be content with himself, even if he were wealthy.
Okay, so what does Cephalus say? The decent man, the person of good character, doesn't bear old age when he's poor. And either the decent man or the indecent man, we all need money. And why does Cephalus say? Is that true that a good person might not bear old age well if they didn't have much money? I mean, if they had no money at all, obviously it would be difficult. Where does Cephalus identify happiness? What is happiness for Cephalus?
Is it like making sure you did the right things in your life?
Do you think that's what is Cephalus's concern? Socrates is just told Socrates has actually kind of been a little bit snippy with Cephalus. He's kind of like been honest to Socrates is a guest in his house, and there's a kind of protocol of politeness. And he's actually been kind of honest with Cephalus, saying that your focus in life has not been character, but money. Has Cephalus been a good guy in his whole life?
No.
Seems like it.
It doesn't seem like it.
No, it doesn't.
And we have to make inferences.
Otherwise, he wouldn't be so concerned now that he's reaching a certain age.
Yeah, and we're going to see that even more when we just get through here and get done. So Cephalus says, if you want to be happy in old age, you got to have money. And why does he say that? Because that's his opinion based on his perspective, based on his understanding and his desires, right? But there's a problem with what money can buy. We're going to find out.
Cephalus, I said, did you inherit or did you earn most of what you possess? What do you mean earned, Socrates? He said. As a moneymaker, I was a sort of mean between my grandfather and my father. For my grandfather, whose namesake I am, inherited pretty nearly as much substance as I now possess, and he increased it many times over. Lysanias, my father, used it to a point where it was still less than it is now. I am satisfied if I leave not less, but rather a bit more than I inherited to my sons here.
So notice he got a medium amount of wealth and he's managed it well. He's worked, right? He's not some lazy person, but he's been given opportunity and he took advantage of his opportunity. And but because he inherited wealth, his life seems to be built around making and managing and spending money, right? More so than the average person, let's say.
The reason I asked you, you see, I said, is that to me, you didn't seem overly fond of money. For the most part, those who do not make money themselves are that way. Those who do make it are twice as attached to it as the others. For just as poets are fond of their poems and fathers of their children, so money makers too are serious about money as their own product. And they also are serious about it for the same reason other men are, for its use. They are therefore hard even to be with because they are willing to praise nothing but wealth.
Okay, what kind of guy is Cephalus? Is he a guy who has money for its use or money for its own sake? Do we see the
For
difference
its own
there?
sake.
Which is it?
Money for his own sake.
I actually think no, because he's talking about those people and he's actually criticizing them. He talks about here, right here, money for its use. I can't highlight because this text doesn't pick up the text. So they are therefore hard even to be because they are willing to praise nothing but money, nothing but wealth. Right. So he's actually criticized. The trick with this argument is the amount of money he inherited. He says, since it was given it to me, I respect money, but it's not the end of and be all, right? It's not good in and of itself. It's good for its use. He actually criticizes the people who start with nothing and become super rich because they did it all on their own. This is an interesting argument. Because they did it all on their own, they're obsessed with the money as a manifestation of their accomplishment, right? And they're singularly concerned with the money and not simply what it can be used for. And the question is, what is Cephalus?
Okay.
The question is, what is Cephalus going to use his money for? That's the key thing.
Yeah, well, according to him, he wants to leave something for his sons, right?
That's part of it. We'll see the and he feels he has an obligation to do that because what his father left him. Let's just finish up this paragraph and we'll get it.
What you say is true, he said. Indeed it is. Indeed it is, I said. But tell me something more. What do you suppose is the greatest good that you have enjoyed from possessing great wealth?
Okay, what's the best thing that's come out of having all this money? Which might be another way of saying, what's the best thing that you've used the money for that gives you the greatest pleasure, which is getting close to the happiness, right? Yeah.
What I say wouldn't persuade many, perhaps. For know well, Socrates, he said, that when a man comes near to the realization that he will be making an end, fear and care enter him for things to which he gave no thought before.
Okay. So here he's being asked by Socrates, what is the best use you've ever put your money to? And then he says, Socrates, you know what? Where are we here? He says, when a man comes near to the realization that he will be making an end, what is he talking about making an end?
Dying.
Yes, death. He's at the end of the
road.
His life,
He's
the
at
road.
the end of the road. So this is a continuation of that metaphor, right? He says, fear and care enter him for things to which he gave no thought before. What are the things the fear and the care inspire him to think about things that he didn't think about when he was young and making all that money and spending it? What is it?
What was the question, Professor?
Says fear, and when he gets old near death at the end of the road, fear and care, let's just say fear enters him regarding things to which he gave no thought before. He doesn't say what those things are. What are they?
Maybe being more religious.
Yeah, it has to do with the source or motivation for his religiosity. Let's just say he's not being religious for religious sake.
Only because he's
Religion's sake.
reaching the end. Now he wants to see God because he's reaching the end. But he didn't think about God during his
When he
past
was
life,
young.
right?
You're getting there. What's he concerned about? What is he thinking
Going to
about?
heaven.
Yeah, let's put it the other way around. He doesn't want to go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
This concern for piety is not concern for respect with God. He doesn't want to go to hell.
Mm.
Okay, if he's
Who
afraid,
does, though?
fear and care, if he's afraid of going to hell, what does that say about his conduct as a younger man when he didn't
He
think?
wasn't that good of a person.
Yeah,
He was fearless.
yeah, let's be clear. He did unjust things.
Unjust things.
And guess what? He got away with them, just like Guy G's.
Oh, I see the
If he had
connection.
gotten,
Oh,
he had
okay.
gotten
I get it.
if he had gotten punished, he wouldn't feel guilty anymore because punishment is like it punishment means you're forced to recognize you did something wrong, among other things, and everybody sees it. And then you kind of get absolved of your guilt because you've done your time, right? The impression is he did things that were wrong and he knows they're wrong and he got away with them. I think that's the conclusion to be drawn. Obviously, not on the scale of Gyges, but see, what's the whole point here? The gods see everything you do, even when the police don't.
Mm-mm. And when you get older, that's when you start realizing all that. And you start.
And why? So, Sophia, why does the age matter now? Because he's getting one step closer to the afterlife, and now he's, well, let's see what he says because he clarifies this now. Natalie, you want to keep going?
The tales told about what is in Hades.
Hades.
That the one Hades?
Yeah, Hades.
Okay. That the one who has done unjust deeds here must pay the penalty there, at which he laughed up to them. Now make his soul twist and turn because he fears they might be true.
What is he afraid of? He fears that what might be true.
That he will pay for all the things that he didn't get caught for doing here in life.
What is he really concerned with? He ain't
Going to
concerned
hell.
with the gods. He's concerned with his own hide. He's concerned with not suffering, right? He's concerned with avoiding punishment, right? And that's it. And the problem is when he committed crimes early in his life or whatever they were, unjust deeds, he didn't get punished and he didn't care that he did them. And not only that, he was kind of like blasé about, he talks about the tales, the myths of Hades. Hades is like the Greek version of hell, right? And so he didn't take them very seriously, those stories. Oh, those are kids' stories, right? Like a lot of people, right? That's understandable. And a lot of people face death and they go, oh, well, what if there is truth to all that?
I got the message, Professor.
Yeah, so let's just finish the paragraph and I want to say one more thing and that's it.
Whether it is due to the debility of old age or whether he discerns something more of the things in that place because he is already nearer to them, as it were, he is, at any rate, now full of suspicion and terror, and he reckons up his recounts and considers whether he has done anything unjust to anyone. Now, the man who finds many unjust deeds in his life often even wakes from his sleep in a fright as children do, and lives in anticipation of evil.
Who's waking in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, afraid?
Those who do unjust things.
Yeah, who?
Cephalus, right?
Yeah, I think Cephalus.
Right.
He's talking about himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? but you don't say it when you've done bad deeds. You just say it's some guy, right?
Yeah.
Do you think Professor that Socrates is aware of what he's feeling
Oh yeah, because he
or the
knows
message he's getting?
Socrates has already established pretty explicitly that Cephalus has not been concerned with his character throughout his life. And he kind of passes it off of like, whatever, you don't have to, if you want to be care about money, that's just what you do. But now we're seeing the consequences of not being concerned about his character, and they come into sharper focus here.
So the man who is conscious in himself of no unjust deed, sweet and good hope is ever beside him, a nurse of his old age, as Pindar puts it. For you now, Socrates, he put it charmingly when he said that whoever lives out a just and holy life.
Okay. So he's afraid of the hellfires. What does he do to solve the problem?
Seeks God.
How specifically?
By doing sacrifices.
Yes. He spends money on the animals, or at least it's his property, right? He's sacrificing his property to the gods because money will get you out of jail. Money will get you out of the hellfires. Right?
Oh, so that makes sense. That's why he's gonna later soon get up and go do it again, right?
Oh, exactly. So that's the next thing. He has this conversation. They start talking about justice, and then Cephalus goes, this conversation isn't for me. I got to go. And where does he go? He goes out to make more sacrifices, right?
So now I'm wondering, how many sacrifices does he do? Like, and what did he do that was so bad?
Well, we don't know the details, at least not here. And of course, the more sacrifices he's making, I suspect it means the more things he thinks he did wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So the problem for Cephalus is he wasn't concerned with his soul or his character till the end of his life. And now things are catching up with him. Right? But think about why they're catching up with him. Because he doesn't totally believe that Hades exists, but it's like Pascal's wager is like, it's better to believe that, not sure if God exists, just believe he exists, because if he turns out to be real, then it's to your benefit, and if he's not real, it's no loss to have believed in him. He's like, it's to my benefit. I'm not sure whether Hades is real, but I have to act like it's real, because if it is, I'm in big trouble. Right? All right, so here's the cat.
Is it because he knows that he can't do it? He's not going to be able to do it anymore.
Do what?
Like do the bad deeds.
Well, he can get away.
He's getting at a certain age, because it gets tiring after a time. So now he's not.
Yeah, but look at his only motivation for stopping injustice. He's already gotten away from the police, and he had no problem with it. It's only when he thinks the hellfires are there that he becomes concerned with justice at all. You get the impression of, if he was convinced that Hades didn't exist, that he wouldn't care about what he's doing here. Right? So this comes back to Gyges. When Gyges is invisible and you can get away with whatever you want, what is the rationale for doing the right thing when there's never going to be any punishment? Think about Gyges. If you
don't want to go to hell.
If you tell Gyges that there's hell and you're going to get punished then, well, then maybe he'll come up with a rationale why to do the right thing when he's invisible. But what if you tell Gyges, you know what? Maybe there isn't a hell. This is all there is. The police and the government and the army.
You keep doing that.
So then the question is, what if there is no afterlife? Here, this man is sufficiently scared by the afterlife. But what about a guy as ambitious as Gyges? I can see him not believing in the afterlife, saying, the hell with that. What's going to stop him? So now you get a deeper question. What is going to stop him from doing injustice when he's invisible? What's the rationale? So this is the question that the rest of the text tries to answer for 300 pages or so. Any thoughts about that? Why? let's put it even in a more difficult way. Why should he do the right thing when he can actually do whatever he wants and get away with it?
Oh, because he wants to sleep well at night.
Yeah, that's assuming he has that assumes why would he not sleep well? That he wouldn't sleep well if he believes in that he's going to go into hellfires. But if he doesn't believe there are any hellfires, what's going to keep him up at night?
Nothing.
Yeah, what if he doesn't have a conscience like we do? What's going to motivate him to do the right thing? What would motivate the average person to do the right thing? Let's say, just under the premise of the thought, it's kind of a thought experiment.
Ask for forgiveness and keep moving, keep it moving, I guess.
Or reward.
Or what others might think, how others may perceive you, or how they may
Okay,
treat
so
you.
that's
based on those things.
perception of other people is big deal because we want people to perceive us well. The problem, the whole concept of the invisibility is that people cannot see you. They don't perceive your wrongdoing. And in fact, they only perceive the right things that you do when you're visible, because Gaijis does all the right. He makes point of doing the right things when he's visible.
What about reward?
Not only does that help him avoid punishment when he doing the right things when he's visible, but it also helps to cloak him in another extra layer of invisibility. Why do the right thing when you can get away with it?
Because it's what makes you feel good.
Yeah, so that's kind of
It's gratification.
Socrates' argument. So there's a couple of things here. It raises the question of why people do the right thing. Do they do it just to avoid punishment, or do they do it because they think it's right? Socrates is going to make an argument that it doesn't sound very convincing to the other characters, really, which is interesting, that you should do the right thing for yourself, independent of any external punishment, that as a human being with a conscience, you're not going to be happy with yourself as a human being in whether there are hellfires or not, right? That you're going to be an unhappy person. And I have another writing. We don't have time to look at it, but the writing takes off from this point and talks about a murderer. Like, let's say you're a murderer. You commit the crime, you get away with it. Well, guess what? You might not go to hell, but you have to live with that murderer, and that murderer is you. And you have to sit there living knowing that you've done one of the worst things that human beings can do, and that's you. And that's what you have to think of yourself as a murderer, right? And whether you could kind of live with yourself, whether you'd want to live with yourself, and that the motivation for doing the right thing is to live with yourself in a kind of state of peace and harmony and accord with yourself, because you know it's under the premise that you know what's right and you actually are concerned by it, and that by doing the right thing you have, we would call it like self-esteem, even a sense of self-worth, because you've met the expectations that you have of yourself as a human being. The problem with that argument that Socrates makes is there are people who don't have a conscience. There are people who take pleasure in murder. There are people who couldn't care less, and they go on. Would you call them happy? Certainly not in Socrates' sense. But do you see people? I'll leave it with this. There's a great movie by Woody Allen called Crime and Punishment, where a very prestigious person in society, in the world of the movie, he kills his wife because he can't stand her anymore, and he has her killed. And he's struggled with the fact that he killed her. He feels guilt. And then he's talking to another character in a certain point in the movie, and he says, I felt guilt about what I did. And he doesn't acknowledge he's talking about himself completely or what he did. Just like Cephalus doesn't acknowledge that he's talking about himself. And he says, I struggled. I had those nights where I woke up with sweat and all that. And then he says, one day I woke up and the sun shined in the room and I heard the birds and the coffee was brewing and I was fine with it. And he just stopped feeling guilt about what he had done, which means that's like the version of the hellfires, like symbolically, right? Because this guy didn't believe he was going to hell for killing his wife. And so it represents a situation what do you do with those people who get away with it and don't have a sense of conscience or a sense of guilt? It also raises the question of what produces conscience. If you think you're going to get in trouble, you feel guilty. You can even hear judges and police officers talk about the way convicts will act very remorseful in public so they can get the benefit of looking like they're guilty. And the moment they're in private, or the moment they're not in the system anymore, they don't give two hoots. They don't feel guilty at all. Right? Okay.
So then in that case, yeah, that's a good question. What do you do with those people?
Yeah. And then the question is like, what does society do about that? And there's some really dark answers, because
If they get caught though, right? Because
not necessarily. One of the dark answers proposed in book 1 here is that those very people who get away with it are the very people who are likely to become the rulers. I think that's one of the implications here.
I got it.
What are they doing with the people who are the rulers in any society? Are the ones who are willing to, they don't just climb a ladder, they step on other people's backs, right? They're ambitious, and they're willing to win at other people's expense in the way the average person probably isn't, right? And so those people who would commit those transgressions would be, they'd be put in the service of gaining power, just like what happens with Gyges. That's what he does with it, right? He gets power through his ability to commit injustice.
Wow.
Maybe. I mean, that's something I've been thinking about when I read this, and I look at some of the more unsavory characters at the top of the political heap in our country. So that's why we have a government that holds the rulers to account, or at least tries to.
But even the government is crooked, Professor.
Yeah, because power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Visibility. So that's, could have a whole political science discussion about power corrupting and so on.
Sad, very sad.
But we should get going here. And Dalen, have a good night. I hope you feel better. We've gone like for a really long time. This was really great. And
I really enjoyed this session, Professor, I have to say.
Good. I'm glad.
Really did. And actually the reading as well.
Okay, good, because I'm, this is a challenging reading. And
but
so
yeah.
I'm always, I never know how students are gonna, whether they warm up to it or.
So, okay, Professor, let's discuss the assignment, because I know that we were having some technical difficulties.
Well, it's fixed now.
Yeah, but I sent mine already before the class started. I rushed through it because I was so afraid that
oh no.
I was going to lose points.
You want to do it over? Look, I'm giving everybody until the end of the week. So you, if I were you, I would take the time. And I'm going to start grading. And
okay.
And you can just leave the one that's there and just post another one. That's the simplest thing to do.
Okay. But you're not going to delete it, right? I can always retrieve it.
I think, yeah. So I think the best thing is I'll just leave it there, to not complicate it. And you have it for whatever you need. But when you post the new one, I'll figure out which is which.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, have a great night. It was a pleasure.
Hi, Professor. I needed to show you the books.
Oh, yes.
So they're right here. I don't think you can see them. Yeah, I have them here.
I got it, Eliester, and I've got you down now for attendance too, once I find.
Okay, perfect. And then you said that you were going to start grading the discussion boards and everything else, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then I don't know if you said this already, but how are you going to be grading it?
So I have some information on the directions that is posted way back in, I think, week 1. But so it's out of 10. Each of them are out of 10. And basically what I'm looking for is just evidence that you've read reasonably carefully, and that you've answered the questions to the best of your abilities, and that you've got full complete sentences with no like glaring typos or glaring grammatical issues. It's an easy grade. Right?
Okay.
You get it done. You show that you've read. You show that you're thinking about the question. That's basically what I'm looking for, and I'll be grading them in the next few days. So you'll see. You'll see.
Okay.
Normally people are getting between like an 8 and a 10, and if you get less than an 8, it means like it's really noticeably deficient.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I don't think my answers are 100% correct. And some of the readings I did have a little bit of trouble with. So, but I did try my best and I followed the instructions and did everything else.
And I have talked about that a little bit throughout the semester, which is that, I mean, these are questions, you're approaching this text for the first time. It's not about being 100% right. It's about getting you to think about the text.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been trying.
Good.
Yeah, I have to admit, Professor, this is a very challenging course.
It is, yeah.
Like sometimes I had to read the paragraphs like 2 or 3 times to comprehend it and to, because sometimes it sounds so tricky, like the wording could be a little bit confusing, but this one I liked. The Hobbes I didn't.
Got it.
That's how I felt about, so when I got the symposium book, I read just the introduction and I had to make so many notes on just the introduction.
Oh my God.
Because it's like different conversations or something of that nature. So it feels like it has a lot of people. And for me, like I need to establish order in my brain of like who's who, so that then I can understand what's happening. So that requires me to like always make like a chart and like a key of like names and who they are. So when it comes up again, I don't find myself going back. Like, where did I see this name? Who was this person? Because that would literally drive me crazy.
Well,
it will make me read over and over. So
the nice thing is when you get to the text of the symposium, it actually breaks the text down in the way other editions do not, where there's a little introduction period where they're talking, and then they go into the formal speeches of the symposium. And we're not going to focus on that whole book. We're going to focus on certain key parts of it.
So what's the trick, Professor? Give us a little insight on how to read these passages and these poems and these literatures.
So
is there a trick to it?
Two things. I mean, number one, I'm exposing everyone to challenging text that I don't expect you to come to class with a perfect command of. That's not the point of all. The point at all is to get some basic ideas from it, and then in part for those to be a point of departure for just discussion, right? And then between the PowerPoints and videos to help flesh out those things.
It does tremendously, yes.
Okay.
All right. So we're not going to see you until when?
Probably the week after next. We'll reconvene.
Okay, please, because I need this connection with you because it's not easy. This class is easy.
And should I show you my books?
Yes.
And Professor, we do have a midterm for this class, right?
What's that, Eliester?
We're having a midterm for this class, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then do you know the date or any information regarding the midterm?
Yeah, so I'm gonna put that up in the next few days, but basically the midterm is going to be due the end of the week just prior to spring break, and it's a take-home midterm with essay questions, not unlike your reading response questions, and you'll have probably about 2 weeks to do the exam. You'll have a lot of time, and you'll have a lot of explanation for the
Do
exam.
we have a review sheet for that?
Once I go over the questions with you, that you'll know what to focus on, and the
Okay.
focus will be, the PowerPoints and the videos connected with those readings.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Professor, so much.
And I'm sorry, who just showed me your books? Because I can't see your name right now.
Natalie.
Natalie. Oh, thank you for the lovely job reading. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you so
Yes,
much.
you did, girl. You had those
Yes,
words
you did
on
amazing.
point.
Well,
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I was like, you
I
go,
enjoyed
girl.
reading it as well, though.
Okay, guys, I'm sleepy. Professor kept me on this Zoom call for almost 3.5 hours, Professor.
long
Can you
enough.
believe it?
Well, now we get a break.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I've been in class since 6. I had a class at 6, and then once it ended, or at 8 something, I joined this class. So I'm about to go to sleep. I'm tired.
I'm exhausted.
You've earned it.
Yeah, so good night,
Hey,
everybody.
everyone.
Take
Ladies,
care.
have a great night. Thank
You
you.
too,
Thank you.
Professor.